In the last video, we went over the BOLT11 spec, the basics of it, and we created a basic reader, which is the first part that we need to parse the BOLT11 with JavaScript. So now we're going to move on to the second part of what we need. We need to, once we parse the separate words in, we need to be able to decode them into the proper type, whether that be a hex value or a UTF-8, or it could be an integer value. So we're going to move on to that next step. First thing we want to do is we want to create a file. Okay, the first thing we want to do in this file is import the reader class that we created in the last video. So the next thing we want to do is start the translation. We need several utility functions for the different data types, either integer, hex, or UTF-8. Okay, so the integer is pretty straightforward. If you remember when we read the type, length, value data fields, the length is how many 5-bit words, and we were just parsing them out as they were. And now we're creating a reader to read those, and it'd be 5 times the length because we're reading individual bits for the integer. Okay, and processing the hex is also fairly straightforward. We're just reading everything since we already split it out into that particular section. And the only thing different, we're creating a buffer, which may be useful for like if it's a signature for signing. I don't think we're using it here, but it's just would be good to have it that way. And we're, based on the encoding, converting it to a string and returning it. So what I'm going to do now is create a static object, and for the keys it's going to be the type. Remember we had the type 5-bit value, length was a 10-bit, and then the actual data itself. So the type is going to be represented by a 5-bit integer, and that will be our key. And we're going to add some objects to it that will give it the name for display, the label, and it will also have a function for processing, which will call one of these two functions. We create those functions so we can reuse them over again. So each key will point to a function that will process it in the way we want for our final result. So as you can see, we have the key of 1, which is the type, using the label of payment hash, and we're processing as hex with hex encoding. Okay, here we have some more hex processing. The only difference is the description is encoding to UTF-8. So now we added some integer processing for expiries, which are pretty straightforward. And the fallback address, we process the hex, but before we do that, we want to see if we need to add a leading 0 to the version or not. Now the routing is less straightforward. So what we have to do is, it's a consistent format. You have the pub key, short channel ID, fee, expiry, and they're all like a fixed length, so as long as we have enough remaining bits to meet that length, we need to loop another time, and then we parse them out into those individual pieces. And now that we parsed the routing, we want to return it, and that will be it, so we can export this. Now let's make some tests. First, add our imports. Next, add our test shell. And our first test. And let's give it a try. Looks like I forgot something. Let's fix that. Looks like I forgot something else. Let's fix that. One more try. There we go. Now let's try a description. Okay, let's run it. And we're good. Okay, now how about expiry? And I really shouldn't be passing anything to the process, so let me clean that up. So now we created a reader, and now we created a decoder using that reader, and our next step in the next video will be to create the parser which uses this decoder. See you then.